What's up, guys? Welcome to G2G Kodia, no filter. We're talking about the 1992 LA riots today, and a brief little history before we get into it is the LA riots happened on April 29th, 1992. Koreans call it Sayigu. Sayigu is 429. Rodney King on March 3rd was arrested, and he was beaten just unimaginably. It was just horrific. And Black Americans have been telling people this whole time there is such a thing as police brutality against Black Americans, but this was the first time it was nationally televised. The officers were caught. They were supposed to go to court. It was 4 officers, and as we all know, they were acquitted. That happened on March 3rd, but on March 16th...
91.
In 91. That happened in 91, which was the year before the riots. And March 16th, we had an individual named Sunja Do, who is a liquor store owner, and she had Latasha Harlins, who was a customer at the time. She was 15 years old, come in, and there was a issue where Sunja thought that she was stealing a Sunny D or an orange juice, and there was an altercation, and as Latasha was leaving, she was shot in the head. Sunja Do was fined only $500. She had probation for 5 years, 400 hours community service, but she didn't get any jail time, which we also think is an act of injustice. However, at the same time, Koreans in general who were liquor store owners or dry cleaner owners were constantly experiencing theft, robbery, aggravated assault in those neighborhoods. So that's why they were armed and defensive in the first place. About 2,300 Korean-owned businesses were destroyed, damaged, or looted, and that's about like $350 million or more in damages, and about 45% of the total cost of damage, which was about 2/3, was not covered by insurance.
When I look back, pretty much this was inevitable because already the racial dynamics between the African Americans and whites cannot get worse than, that situation, even now. So think about Black Lives Matter movement. But police brutality, even at 8 years now, right?
Right.
Still, that is a concern. So Korean immigrants walked into that time bomb without knowing time bomb is actually ticking and hidden all over their places. And simply we bought into idea of American dream, and if we work hard, then we'll achieve our dream. So we didn't pay attention to the history of this country as well as that the complex racial dynamics and suspicion of African Americans and other minority groups toward, the Asian Americans.
If, as immigrant parents, right, they're working 12 hours a day at a liquor store.
Even 14, 16 hours.
Working a tremendous amount of hours. They don't know the language well yet. And a lot of these people weren't necessarily like business owners when they were in Korea. They were artists, they were college kids, they were people that are like, hey, let's go to America, have this new life. They're doing this, they also have kids, right? Do you think they had the capability or the resources to learn about the context of racial kind of tensions between America? Do you think they had that ability?
Number one, when Korean Americans coming to this country, they already had a preconceived racial bias against the African Americans. Because Korea is pretty much liberated by the America from Japanese colonialism, right? So Koreans had certain racial stereotypes by watching Hollywood movies.
Right.
So imagine how Hollywood movies portraying Asian Americans and African Americans. So already Korean Americans has a certain bias that African Americans are all uneducated, violent, potentially criminals. And what they see in their community, that urban, like South Central, is reinforcing that stereotype. But they never imagine there are actually African American middle class or even high class, right?
Right.
Or educated intellectuals. Right? So our community, I would blame to some extent the leadership of our community. There are people who actually organizing and provide orientation for newcomers. This is the history, this is the situation. So when you open business, pay attention to these things. Even very basic cultural difference. For example, we Koreans not looking at the eyes to eye to the other person. Because in Korean it means 째려본다.
Oh.
You understand? It looks like a confrontation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking over here, Dr. Leo. Please continue.
You see my point,
Yeah, no,
right?
yeah.
Especially younger person to
Right.
elder person, you do not squarely look at each other. You just look down and listening, right? But in American culture, if you look at eye to eye, if you don't do the eye to eye contact, then either you're hiding something or looking down, you are not paying attention. So that simple minor cultural changes build up the misunderstanding on the part of the African Americans. Koreans are looking down, Koreans are demeaning us. So even giving money, we do not give it to the hand of the other person. We just put on the because we avoid the hand-to-hand touch, especially between different sexes, right? So all those minor things adding to, linguistic, inability or limitation created the built-up misunderstanding and bias between the two. So when Sunjadu incident happened, it really, again, like Rodney King, reaffirmed Korean merchants are here to exploit us, not to serve us or work with us. But I would say a lot of that has to do with cultural misunderstanding and unpreparation, right? On part of our community. Our community was not prepared for cultural, diversity.
I know for the media, they only showed a certain part of the video. So they only showed the part where Sun Jae-do shoots Latasha in the head. And they cut out the part where they had the altercation, they had the argument before any of that. So that just really heightened tensions between blacks and Koreans. And that just showed how media only portrayed like certain parts. And for the most of it, they just portrayed Korean Americans as really negative.
Yeah. The media portrayed the Sun Jae-do's action as a cold-blooded, calculated action. But no, it's actually out of our emotion. Yeah. And also, Elliot mentioned, if you look at the entire video, there's no way we can justify the Sun Jae-do's action, against Latasha. Okay, so I want to make it very clear. Yeah. But Latasha threw the two solid punches into Sun Jae-do's face. Okay? So it's a tragic, unfortunate, but it's not something Sun Jae-do simply, out of nowhere took out gun and shot her. No, it was a altercation between the two.
I actually found this name called the middleman minority theory.
Yes.
And that was basically where a certain minority group occupies a position between two other groups, and maybe that position is like a retailer or a business owner. But what happens is that the subordinate group below that is then feels like they're being taken advantage of, and because we as Koreans are in the middle, we then buffer the tension between the actual dominant group. And so then media totally misportrayed this and I think played into that dynamic. And as a result of that, we find both racial groups being like stereotyped. We find the African American group being seen as violent, as these criminals who are going into these stores, who are causing these riots and mass violence. And then we see the Korean people being portrayed as cold, as greedy, as people trying to take advantage of the lower income neighborhoods. And then with that happening, there isn't any acknowledgement of actual systematic injustice that's happening and the white individuals taking responsibility at all.
Yeah.
But I just found that fascinating because there's this whole underlying conversation that's not being talked about. And then it's just pointed at like our community. And I think that's what's so frustrating and what's so saddening